I'm afraid that the overall insight is unfortunately right, which is it is far. I mean, the entire world is doing too little in order to support the weaker nations and the weaker peoples amongst us, the weaker economically, those who cannot afford it or cannot produce it. So actually, the debate on these issues is not new. It's actually 6 months old or 8 months old, right? It's true that other international players seem to be more active, at least at the outset regarding it. I'm referring to China and to Russia in some extent, and to India in a nuanced way. So actually, President Biden, in a very spectacular way, right before boarding the plane to Europe, announced 500 million doses, and then the Europeans matched that with 500 extra. So we're speaking about 1 billion doses, but that's still far away from the needs in places mainly Africa and to some extent Latin America. So the debate amongst the Western players is also valid in that sense, in terms of, for example, the rights of the vaccine, the commercial aspects which are attached to the logistics. So we're not over, but we're speeding up. All of us in the West, in the East, in Asia, in Europe, in America, we're speeding up. Shall we speed up furthermore? We should. Mm-hmm. My takeaway so far is that things are happening on the facade level very pleasantly. We saw very beautiful pictures of the Atlantic Ocean. We saw the evening with Her Majesty the Queen. We hear all kind of tips which are sort of filtering from the political advisors to the press, saying that how important those bilateral meetings are, the ones which are taking place aside the plenary meetings of the 7 leaders. So everything is fine, but no illusions about it. We know how low the agenda is and how complicated it is and how nuanced it is. And let me just add that we know in the dynamics of those summits, which this one lasts 3 days, it could last more than almost 36 extra hours now. The first half, the first 2/3 are usually smoother. It's towards the last hours that differences and nuances actually come up to the surface. So let's wait for tomorrow, Sunday, and let's watch also what is coming later on, which is the NATO summit in Brussels on Monday and Tuesday, before President Biden meets President Putin in Geneva right afterwards. Mm-hmm. Well, most European leaders do share the overall vision of the world on large scale. But not only. In their vision, through their insights, there are nuanced interests which are, first of all, their own national interest, and you can see nuances, very clear ones, between the British ones, the French ones, the German ones, the Italian ones, and the smaller countries, the Eastern European countries, etc. But in order to see the full picture or get closer to the full picture, let me do one step backwards, not in order to deal with necessarily with the past, but in order to try and get a larger, a wider overall picture. I think that both in terms of the American vision and to a large extent the European version, the idea, which is now about a decade old, of pivoting Western policies towards first priority in Asia, around China, is still valid. But what we see right now, and what we see in a more detailed way over the last, at least since Biden entered the White House 5 months ago, is that in order to establish a new solid West American or American and European allies policy towards China, which is, of course, in the long run, the medium-long run, the number one adversary, if not enemy, in order to do that, in order to get to the Pacific, you have to cross the Atlantic first. And this is what we see on the American side. America is crossing the Atlantic, if you want to put it in the pictorial way, in order to consolidate the positions with the traditional European allies, indeed with the common values of Western type democracy, which is not only rhetorics and public relations sort of thing, which is something which is anchored deeply in the consciences and the political systems of European nations and North American nations. And, after hoping to do that properly, they will all move to the Pacific. So, although the shortest way from America to confront China is to cross the Pacific, they'd rather do that through a crossing of the Atlantic first in good conditions.
Well,